Okay. Thank you, everyone. The meeting is recorded. All right, so we can go ahead and get started. So, Ms. Ruff sent us this version with her edits and comments. I don't know if you had an opportunity to review the email, Ms. Ferguson and Mr. Herring. The email that I forwarded you, for some reason, we're not getting Ms. Ruff's emails, so we need to figure that out, but.
And I do apologize for that. I tried to get it to you all over a week before the meeting so you'd have time to look at it. But it didn't dawn on me until Monday when I hadn't heard from anybody that perhaps there was a problem. And that's when it was confirmed that nobody had received it. So my apologies.
Sorry, I didn't mean to stop sharing. Can you see again? Okay. I don't know, Councilwoman Ferguson or Councilman Herring, if you've had an opportunity to look at it, but maybe what we could do is just kind of go through the comments. I'm going to be toggling back and forth between my phone and the computer just because it's too hard to see the notes while I'm sharing. So I'm going to go back up to the top of the email.
Yeah, because I really haven't had time to really review the notes. So
yeah, so I thought it would be best if we kind of went through that today. So starting at the top, just going back to Ms. Ruff's email. Why is it turning off?
If it would be easier for you, I have the email right here. If you want to just go to the sections that are
yes,
changed,
that would be helpful.
I can explain to you what I said in the emails.
Yeah, so you started with Article 1, right? That's where you want us to start?
Correct.
Okay, let me.
So when you're looking at the changes, at least on my version, things that I had done, it looks like in your version, the things that I did are in purple.
Okay.
Okay. So actually, it's really just a question to the committee, and that is whether it wants to change the beginning of this section. Well, I shouldn't say most. Many municipal charters start with the language that I've added, which is it is the inhabitants of the city of Glenarden within the corporate limits legally established from time to time are hereby constituted and continued a body corporate by the name of the city of Glenarden. And then you would go on to say the charter is a municipal corporation. You'll see where I have deleted something that says the corporate name is the city. That's because we moved it up to that first sentence. If, however, you prefer to retain it the way it is, that's fine as well.
Okay, so you're just saying that this is more consistent with what other municipalities have?
Right.
Okay.
In defining what the corporate body is.
Okay. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. It conveys the same thing to me. I don't. Councilman Herring or Councilwoman?
yeah, I'm fine with the change.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, so am I.
Okay. Okay.
Then
good.
the next change was in 201B, and I think it's one we had referenced earlier, and that is the Department of Legislative Reference is now called the Department of Legislative Services.
Okay.
And so we would take out the word reference.
Okay.
And then later it talks about where you can find a copy of the legal description of the corporate boundaries, and it says in the city. Well, that could be anywhere. So I was just suggesting that perhaps you want to say at least in City Hall, or you could say, in the clerk's office, or you could say with the city manager's office, whatever wherever you want to identify that they will be located. But it seemed to me that just say on file with the city was kind of a broad statement.
Okay. Councilman Herring, do you know where it's kept? Should it be with the city manager in the city manager's office, or with the council clerk, or who?
It says that most of our council clerk is the keeper of the records.
Okay,
I think later on in the chart, I think it says the council clerk is the keeper of the records. So I think it'd be in our offices.
okay. Even
Corporate
around the corporate
boundaries.
boundaries, right? Okay.
Personally, I think it should actually be in code enforcement tab, actually. Because they usually have all our maps and everything for all the buildings and everything else we bid, our permits and everything else. So maybe
Okay.
it should be better stationed there, because things get lost in our office also.
Okay, so maybe we should,
Yeah.
and we don't call it City Hall, we call it the municipal building, right? But is that,
Okay.
is that the proper name, City Hall?
It's interchangeable.
Yeah, if
Okay.
you call it the municipal center, that's, I was just trying to retain the word city in that. So we can change it to the municipal center. That's not a problem. I might suggest to you that if the council clerk is charged with maintaining the records of the city, that perhaps that's the best place for the formal document to be kept, and a copy with the code enforcement or the other department to which you had referred.
I think that's a good idea. You should have it in at least two places anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cross referencing.
So maybe we could just say though, in the city's municipal center, we don't have to get as specific as to the specific location.
Well,
What do you think about that?
the only advantage to identifying it as the council clerk is if somebody were looking, they would know where to go, right?
I mean, I don't have a problem naming where they are.
Okay,
Now, if it said the municipal center, certainly they could call, and hopefully the person with whom they would speak would be able to direct.
Yeah, that's true.
right away.
okay.
So are you saying, should you put both the clerk, council clerk and the code enforcement office, or just one?
I think I would recommend just keeping it with the council clerk and have the code enforcement officer having a copy being kind of an administrative process internal to
Okay.
the city.
Okay. And this will go for a place. Okay, so that was the second one. Then you had Article 3, the organization of the council.
Right, so you, at the last meeting, the committee had asked for some information as to how some of the other jurisdictions organize the language with respect to the legislative powers, right? And how it is how it's vested in the council, and how they describe how the council is constituted. So if you look in what I had sent, I don't know if you can show the comment as well. I gave you 4 examples: Bowie, Mount Rainier, College Park, and Riverdale Park, to
Okay,
kind of show you how each of those jurisdictions phrase it. You can see some similarities. It's just a matter of what your preference is with respect to identifying how you're going to arrange it, and how you decide this issue will help you when we get to the next Article 3, which will then help you with some of the changes you made to the titles in the beginning, right, into in the index. So I think this is a very important section for you all to think about how you want that phrase, because you want to get it the way the committee intends to recommend.
okay. So what I'm highlighting here is what I think, and Councilwoman Ferguson and Councilman Herring, correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is more of the wording of what we're saying, that the city council consists of the mayor and 4 council members, versus what Bowie has and what College Park has. It makes it seem as though the mayor is not a part of the council in the wording.
Well, it says basically the same thing in Bowie. It says,
Well,
should be
yeah, you're
vested
right.
in
I see that
council
now.
consisting, yeah, of a mayor.
Yeah, so College Park looks like it's separate. It's mayor and 8 council members. So, I mean, I like the Mount Rainier one because it just seems very straightforward. And we would change it from 4 to 6. Can you see it?
Either one, either Bowie or Mount Rainier is fine with me.
Okay.
I mean, they're both saying the same thing in a different way.
Yeah. I just like the Mount Rainier one because
Yeah.
it's calling it out clearly that it's what type of government we have.
Okay.
And so if you look down at the town of Riverdale Park for just a moment, you'll see that they say, and I'm not
Okay.
suggesting you do what they say, I'm using it as an example. But they say the legislative powers of the town are vested in the town council consisting of 7 council members.
Mhm.
6 is described in Article 4, who shall be elected as hereinafter provided, blah, blah, blah. So you'll see later when I reference, when we get into discussing where we talk about the mayor, you can see that some do it in the same article. They'll talk about the legislative powers and they'll talk about the mayor will have their duties and election procedures and everything addressed in the same article. Or like Riverdale Park, the mayor has their own article like you currently have right now. Okay. So that'll be something you can think about.
Well, I would tend to lean towards something that was just more plain in the language.
Mhm.
I see what you're talking about in the town of Riverdale. But it just seems very wordy.
Oh, and you don't have to do that. I was just using more the reference to the different article as something to show you how they organize their charter,
Mhm.
which would be consistent with keeping yours the way it is with the mayor separate, which would be kind of less changes for you,
Yeah.
unless you wanted to bring them all into the same article.
Okay, that's fair. Let me see what we did before. I know did we keep it as a separate article, the mayor, or did we just completely delete that article though?
Well, in the
Yeah.
so I
We
think-
have a section, no, it's section 305. I think we took out that whole article, right?
yeah, so if you go where is that? There we go.
Mm-hmm.
So
We
if
kept
you
the
go up to the index, I think you had suggested that you might take out some of the language about the mayor.
Mhm.
And I guess what I was saying is you might want to consider keeping that article that has the mayor addressed. That doesn't take away from having the mayor be part of the council.
Right,
that
but I
make
think the reason why we were saying that is because up here, where it was previously, the section 305 was for the president and
Mhm.
vice president, that's where we put the mayor and mayor pro temp.
Right. And we'll talk about that too.
Okay. What are your thoughts, Councilwoman Ferguson, Councilman Herring?
Honestly, I think we need to keep that section in, but we're talking about section 5.
Yeah, the mayor section. So you think we should keep it as a separate article, the mayor?
I think we should, because I think it really needs to definitely be spelled out what the mayor's powers are so that they don't assume, again, like we've been running into now, I got this, I got that.
Okay, so then should we go with the language that is more similar to Riverdale, where it says the legislative powers of the town are vested in the town council consisting of 7 council members, 6 as described in this article, and the mayor as described in article, whatever our article is, who shall be elected as hereinafter provided, and each of whom shall hold office for a term of 2 years. I think this if we're gonna have it in a separate article, this language, while wordy, makes that delineation clear.
And you'll see what I did in 301 to try to mimic that with what you have, that all legislative powers of the city shall be vested in a council consisting of a mayor as described in Article 4 and 6 council members who shall be elected. So
But let me
Oh.
ask you a
it doesn't
question.
have to be quite that wordy, I guess is my point.
In Riverdale Park, so are they saying it's gonna be 7 council members and a mayor? Or is it saying 7 council members and the mayor's gonna come from the council? I mean, because it seems
Yeah,
like it's saying exactly what we had before, what we have now.
No, it's saying 7 council members, 6.
Oh, 6 as
described
described in
in-
Article, and the mayor as described in Article 5.
Yeah. So it would, those are the 7 council members.
I don't know, I think the other one, I think the other one is the legislative, that's in the town council consisting of 7 council members. Okay, it's, I don't know, it just seemed like that Riverdale Park one's a little bit more wordy.
Right, it does. That's what I was like,
straightforward.
but I think what Ms. Ruff wrote here for us kind of consolidates that a bit. So do you see here in section 301?
Yeah, and 6 council members, yeah, that's a little bit more to the point.
Okay.
And then the blue changes were changes you as the committee had agreed to last meeting.
Yeah, because it's 4, so it's not 2. So
Mhm.
unless we want to change it back to 2, but right now it's 4. Okay. All right, so that looks good. And then what was the next one? Hold on.
So I wanted to ask you a question about the shall begin 1 hour after the start of the first regular council meeting.
Okay.
And you can do that. It just seemed a little interesting to me that what if you're in the middle of a discussion and that 1 hour comes, do you stop everything and move to the new council? A lot of times people will simply say they'll be seated at a certain meeting, and then on the agenda for that meeting, it'll say when everything happens.
Mhm.
I mean, you can keep it at an hour. It just seemed interesting that you have that in there.
Let me just say, I think previously some council members didn't want to leave and they dragged it out.
Yeah.
And they dragged it out and they dragged it out and we're like, okay, look, we're ready to get the other council seated, let's move forward. So I think it needs to be spelled out somewhere in there. I mean, even if it's 2 hours later, 2 hours into the meeting, but I think also you have people that come out and they don't want to drag it out. People come out to see that people get sworn in and all of that. So
do you want
They
to
just-
keep it?
I think they just want to, just want to, I mean, I think so. I mean, it's an hour after, I mean, you got an hour to do whatever you got to do and move on, and the new council will just have to be seated.
Mhm.
I've just seen council members just drag it out, and didn't want to leave and they wanted to, I just don't want to be sitting, when a new council we're ready to be seated and somebody decide they want to, drag it out longer than it really needs to be because they don't want to get off the council or they want to make a point or something. Instead of just, I mean, I think 2 hours is more than enough time at a meeting, or an hour and a half is more than enough time to do whatever you got to do, wrap up. It's an election coming up, you can really move off the seat. So if you didn't do it before you got there, then it's too late.
Right. What if we
Yeah.
say shall begin within 1 hour, just so that it's not like you have to wait an hour before it happens? Like they might, conversely be ready to go and be done in 15 minutes.
And that's happened too,
Mhm.
where the council was just like, okay, we're done. And then we had a recess,
Mhm.
For 45 minutes.
Well,
wait to-
do we need to do that though? Or can we, if we say within 1 hour, then if you end in 15 minutes, then you can move on and then people don't have to be sitting around waiting for the next folks to get sworn in.
I mean, I guess then that leads back to Ms. Ruff's point. Just say, they should be sworn in on this date,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and then you won't have a time restraint. But I mean, we'll have to leave it up to the president or whoever's running the meeting to have some due diligence and know we got to wrap this up.
Mhm.
I mean, I mean, sometimes you need a cutoff. It depends on who's on. I mean, like I said, I've seen the council swing both ways. It depends on who's in power at that time, who's getting voted out. So I mean, it's something to think about.
Mhm.
Mhm. An hour after the start of the first round.
I mean, I guess so. You would just always know then what the time would be that the new council will be sworn in at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, 8:30.
The regular, oh yeah, the regular meeting starts at 7:30. Okay. June following the election. Okay, so we want to
Yeah,
keep the 1
because
hour.
you say if we have guests coming,
Mhm.
and they know the meeting, the people meet and only meet for 15 minutes and they're, purposing. So I know it's, normally it's an hour after we do it earlier than that. That's why he was saying where we have to recess. So people purpose, okay, it's gonna start at 8:30, then they might be just getting there. And if we start early, then they might miss the swearing in and everything else.
That's
Right.
fair. Okay. Now you put first regular council meeting. We only have one regular meeting. Should we change this then to a capital R?
Okay.
The regular council meeting in June following the election. Okay. Okay. So what was next?
All right, so the next one is simply because I've had this come up in
302.
some jurisdictions previously as to when do you judge the qualifications of the council members with respect to the age requirement? Is it at the date, as of the date of the election? Is it as of the time of filing for candidacy? Or is it as of the time of the swearing in? And so I just wanted to ask you if you wanted to make any addition to what language is proposed here to address that issue, or whether you just want to leave it as they shall be 21 years of age.
I mean, I think this is a good point to bring up because it will then guide the Board of Elections really on how they certify a candidate, right? Is it
Yes.
candidates who are 20, which one? My opinion is should be as the date of them being sworn in, but because that's when they'll actually start doing the council member work. But I don't know, Councilwoman Ferguson, Councilman Herring, your thoughts?
Um,
Go ahead, Ms. Ferguson.
I mean, it says they shall be at least 21 of age as of the date of their election.
That's the part that Ms. Ruff added in as of the date of their election.
But it
versus
could be-
they have to be 21 before they can even decide to run. What was it before? I don't see.
It's either 21 for them to be certified as a candidate, so that they have to be 21 when they file their candidacy, 21 when the election happens, or 21 when they are sworn in.
Mm.
And I was saying, I think it should be 21 when they're sworn in, because that's when they're actually doing the job. We don't have a long election. Our election is like 1 month.
I don't know. I think, me personally, I think you should be 21. That drop dead date of 21 to run for office
So when they file
That's-
their candidacy.
when they file a candidacy.
Like in the March, that's what I was trying to say.
Mhm.
So that means, so they'll be 21 when they're campaigning, and they'll already be 21 prior to.
Right.
Right.
I don't feel terribly strongly about this one. I just think that it could potentially limit candidates. But again, our election period is not even that long, so. Any candidate who's 20 and will be 21 by June, I don't know if there's that many people. So if your birthday is in May, between May and June, just forget about it. You gotta be 21 by April.
Yeah. Mm.
See, and that's why I'm saying I think it should be 21. That way you have an ID that says you're 21 years old, you can run. And you know, okay, my birthday is 9 months down the road, and you know, who knows what somebody will pull out. I just think it's just, you know, you're 21 years old, this is what your driver's license say, go ahead and run. And then you gotta sit there and figure, okay, you're 20, you're 19, you're 29, and da. You know, because the election could be longer than 30 days. They said it just got to be certified within 30 days before the election, but they can certify you earlier if they wanted.
Okay. So 21 as of the date of filing for candidacy. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
The next one.
So the next set of changes there address what I thought I heard you saying. So if I took it too far, please let me know. But
Mhm.
when you added at the end of that section, must reside in Glenarden 75% of the time, it made me think about what it was you were trying to achieve. And so to try to say whether somebody has resided in a particular place 75% of the time is a little bit difficult. Oftentimes you see residency tied into things like you have in the beginning of that sentence. So what do you identify as your address on your taxes? Where's your automobile registered? Where's your driver's license registered? Where's your permanent? Otherwise, you'd have to have somebody be able to attest to the fact that 75% of 365 days, or whatever the number of days in question are, that the person resided there. And that might be a difficult thing to do. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then it started thinking about really what you wanted to make sure too is that people who represent a ward and represent the city continue to maintain their residency throughout their term. And so I had added that each council member running to represent a ward shall be a resident of the ward the council member seeks to represent at the time of filing for candidacy, and a council member shall retain throughout the term of office all the qualifications for his office, and failure to retain all such qualifications is cause for forfeiture of office. So if that takes it a step further than you had indicated at the last meeting, please let me know.
I mean, my concern is that you have some people that may have have property here or a house, and they still have a home here, but they live in another area, municipality, or even a state. But the home is in their name and it's their property, but they live 100% of the time, pretty much live at the house, at their home. They could have maybe they bought a house in, Waldorf or somewhere, or Bowie. So they have two homes. But if they have a resident and they're registered here and they have tax papers and everything like that, a child or something could be living there, but they don't live there, and they could qualify living in another municipality, but be on our council. And they don't even live in Glenarden.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and I think that was the spirit of why we were saying 75% of the time. But I hear what Ms. Ruff is saying about how would that be? How would you be able to prove where someone is staying and calculate that to say it's 75% of the time or not? I do think, though, that if you did something like Ms. Ruff suggested, as part of the certification for candidacy, looking at the address on their tax return, that would be important, right? Because you're on your tax return, you can't, if you don't even live in Maryland, right? Like that's gonna be evident on your tax forms, because you got to pay taxes in the state that you reside in. So if we use that, I think that is a more certain way to verify residency than even a driver's license. I mean, my father's been down here for years now, and his driver's license is still New York.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the tax, because that might be, get more deeper, because like my son, I have a son in Florida, and he still has Glenarden, Maryland.
Mhm.
But also with the section that talks about the homestead tax credit, you technically supposed to only can file that on one house, the place where you reside. You sign an affidavit saying that this is your principal residence, and you will be residing in that property. So you're not supposed to have it on two houses. So most people put it on the house that they live in, because that's where they file their taxes and everything. So that's another check. Because I do know people who have, and if you go to the real property database, it'll tell you right there, is this your principal residence? And it says no. So that means you don't live there. So that's another check we had on this. That's why we had that put into the charter.
Okay, I don't know. What are the qualifications for the homestead tax credit? I don't think everyone's qualified for it.
Well, everybody's qualified for it as long as you reside in that residence. You sign an affidavit saying, I hope you signed up for it, because you are entitled to get it.
No, I guess what I mean is not everybody owns a home.
No, everybody doesn't own a home. In that instance, everybody doesn't own a home. So that's what I'm saying. If somebody lives in an apartment, you can't say if somebody lives in there 75% of the time or not. You have to just go with other in the election post 700 of the chart. It says what other things you can use as proof of residency: driver's license, mail, going to a residence, all of that.
You said that's in the code?
I think that's in the code. I think that's under checks in 700.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's really what Ms. Huff said. You can't really tell. I mean, because one of my sons lives in Virginia, and he still gets mail here. And he's been living in Virginia for years, so that doesn't mean anything.
My brother did.
I guess you just have to just accept the fact that they're just being forthright, I guess.
I don't know why I can't type on this computer tonight. Okay. All right, so we'll check the code, and we'll do the homestead tax credit for those who are homeowners, and then we'll have to make sure that we have another way for people who are not homeowners in the city. Okay, section for the time period claimed. Okay. All right. And the next one was section 303. Hold on. Okay, you said you provided it in a comment. Okay,
Right.
there it is.
So 303, you all had specifically asked for examples of how other jurisdictions structure their salary.
Mhm.
And so I provided you with some examples from, uh-oh, mine won't open. Oh. From College Park, Riverdale Park, Bowie, and I believe the first one is Mount Rainier, yes.
I like the so far just the Mount Rainier one. That sounds like what we talked about, and you highlighted it here that it may be higher. It doesn't necessarily have to be higher, and I think that was the point you were making, Councilman Herring, when we were talking about this. It doesn't have to be.
Right. Yeah, I think gives you the flexibility.
So do we like what this says? Do we just want to copy and paste that? What Mount Rainier has? Is that Mount Rainier? Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Oh.
So I think the difference between Mount Rainier and Riverdale Park is they don't have amounts in them.
Mhm.
You know, you have College Park and Bowie started with some annual amounts, and then Bowie has an increase consistent with the CPI.
Yeah, I don't think we should have amounts in there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Mount Rainier's is kind of straightforward and simple. And we don't have to worry about changing it for anything, right? Like if future councils decide that the mayor and the council member salaries should be equal, there's no change that's needed. If they think that the mayor should get more, there's no change that's needed. What do y'all think?
Fine with that.
Okay.
Same.
Thank you.
What'd you say?
Huh?
No, I thought Councilman Herring said something funny. I thought. Why I can't copy it? All right, well, I'll just put use. And then the next one was, okay, 304. Okay.
And then you also, I think, said you wanted to add December to the months that you would
We
not
did.
be required.
A winter recess.
Right.
Could you go on? I'm sorry, I need to take this phone call. I will be right back.
Okay.
You
So
can
the,
keep going. Mhm.
so the next, so I guess I would like to get consensus that you did want to add December.
I mean, this was, I mean, as far as I know, have y'all ever done it before? Mr. Herring, I know this was my second term, so we didn't do it the first time. Was
No,
this the first?
we always talked about it, but we always ran into a time crunch, because it wasn't spelled out, so we had to vote, to put it in there. But if this is already in a charter, then we can choose to do it if we want to. At least the option is there.
Is there, yeah. I don't have any problem with it being there.
Me
Okay.
neither.
So I don't think we
What
have
do you
any
think?
control over the screen, but So the next thing you'll see is in that section is address the open meeting.
It broke up.
So in B, 304B, it talks about the closed sessions. And my suggestion would be to take that out. And that's because you don't want the town's charter to ever conflict with what the state law says. And currently, you have 12 exceptions in your charter, but state law currently has 15. So at some point after you had adopted this closed session language, the law changed and added more exceptions that are not included here. And you would want to be able to avail yourself of all of the exceptions that are provided by state law. So my recommendation would be to take out the language that is included in the Open Meetings Act, and to rather say that your meetings will be conducted in accordance with the Open Meetings Act, which you can find in state law in the General Provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland. I think that would be a better approach. But if you want to keep it in there, we should update it so it reflects what the current law is. And then the city would have to make a note that whenever the state law does change, if it does change with regards to Open Meetings Act, you're going to have to make those changes to your charter too.
Right, which would be, that's not a simple process because it would be a charter resolution. There'd be a
Correct.
charter amendment. I mean, I think referencing just the Open Meetings Act makes
And
the most practical sense.
required to comply with it, right? So you're
Mhm.
not saying that, oh, we're going to take it out of the charter, it won't apply, or we're not going to be required. You're required by state law to comply with this, right? And so we will put that affirmative statement in there too.
Mhm. Councilwoman Ferguson, are you frozen or are you? Am I frozen? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Okay.
What happened?
I don't, it looked like you were frozen for a moment.
Oh, okay. Y'all can hear me good now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say, I mean, I did hear everything, that was said, what the attorney said. I mean, just listening, I listen as she said, just in the reference where it is, will be fine. Or like she said, if we did want to list it, then we need to update it, to say what it says, since we don't have the number of additions. But it'll be easy. I mean, it's just as easy to say where it's found and, according to the law and where it's found.
Mhm.
It would keep it from being so wordy. But and then I don't know, Glenarden people, they want to see everything spelled out.
Yeah, but I think the challenge is then you always have to be doing charter amendment. Well, not always, but whenever there's a change to the Open Meetings Act, you're gonna need to make a charter.
And
amendment.
and that was the other thing I had thought about before I got froze. That was another thing that I thought as well. It'll
Mhm.
keep us from having to do that.
Right.
Doing charter changes and the 50 days and all that kind of stuff.
And we could always do something like an appendix, right? Like we can always reference it and then attach the most recent copy.
Yeah, I
Can we
guess.
do that?
You could.
Mhm. Okay. So we're in agreement. We're just going to reference the Open Meetings Act. And we agreed to add in December
Yes.
for the winter recess.
because it gives you the option.
We don't have to do it, but it's
Right,
there.
right. Mhm.
Okay. All right, so going back to the email.
So that's what paragraph B says pretty much, that all meetings will be open to the public, except those that are allowed to be closed in accordance with Maryland law. And that the rules of the council shall provide that residents of the city shall have a reasonable opportunity to be heard at any regular or special meeting in regard to any municipal question.
Okay,
No ordinance, rule, or regulation shall be finally adopted at a closed session. And then I put what the current reference to the law is.
oh, okay. All right, good, and then we can just attach general provisions, articles, the annotated code on the website with the charter. Okay, so that was section 304. So section 305 was the next one you had comments on, and you were saying chairperson.
Okay, so yes. You had president, we had president, vice president, then we had mayor pro tem. What I was trying to say here is really what we're talking about here is not as much about the mayor and the mayor pro tem. We're under council, so we're talking about how the council's going to operate. So it will be the chairperson. And so
Okay,
what I was trying to say is the mayor would serve as chairperson of the council and preside over all meetings of the council. Because
Okay.
all of the mayor's other duties that are, some of which are referenced in that section, come as part of the duties that are outlined in the following article. So does that
got it.
make sense?
Yeah, and we're gonna keep that article to Councilman Herring's point so we can clearly articulate the role of the mayor. Okay.
Right. So all this is intended to do is talk about their being the presiding over the meetings. And then the next one is that the mayor pro tem will take their place in the event they are absent or have a disability. And then I added language you see in other jurisdictions, and you don't need to add it if you don't want to, but that the mayor pro tem does not receive additional compensation for the times that they serve as mayor.
Okay, okay. Oh, and it's pro tem, not pro temp.
Yes, yeah,
Okay. I thought it was pro temp like
like
temporary.
temporary.
Okay. All right. Was there anything else? I'm just looking back at your notes.
Yep, I think that's it for that one. Then 306, when you talk about a majority of the members of the council constitute a quorum for the transaction of business. And it says, no ordinance shall be approved nor any other action taken without the favorable votes of at least 4 members of the council. I wanted to add unless otherwise required by law or this charter, because there are times when you will be required to have a supermajority vote, and you want to make sure that that occurs. And it's mostly to do with budgeting.
Yeah, like a charter amendment or something.
Budget amendment.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I meant, budget amendment, yeah.
So you all had asked that ordinance actually requires 5 votes. So do we mean this to say no resolution shall be approved? So
I think Councilman Herring corrected me though. Councilman Herring, that's not true. We don't need 5 votes for an ordinance.
No.
You just need 4 votes for an ordinance. 5 votes to override.
To override a veto?
Yeah, 5 votes to override a veto, but you just need 4 votes.
Okay. Okay. So then, okay, so Loose for unless otherwise required by law or this charter, okay. And then,
Well, so let me ask you,
sorry, because you say section 308 requires a supermajority, which is 5, right?
right, so 308. A resolution. A resolution shall be enacted by the affirmative vote of at least 4 members of the council. And then an ordinance passed, amended, rejected. In cases of emergency, the provision that an ordinance may not be passed if the meeting at which it is introduced may be suspended by the affirmative vote of 5 members of the council. And then I'm trying to go down, sorry. So D, which is what's proposed to be taken out, it says that the mayor shall return all ordinances. And the reason we took that out is because the mayor won't have a veto power anymore. So it wasn't relevant any longer. And that's why the 5 votes to I'm looking to see where a favorable vote of 5/7 of the whole council is required to deal with the event of a veto, so. But I don't see where it says that a regular ordinance requires more than 4 votes. Am I
It
missing
doesn't.
it?
No, it doesn't. Regular
Okay.
ordinance, I mean, regular ordinance only requires 4 votes.
Okay,
the part that requires 5 is if a ordinance is introduced, if we're trying to introduce and pass an ordinance on the same day, then that requires an affirmative vote of
That-
5 members to suspend that.
because it's an emergency, yes.
Mhm.
And
But I
so-
think we should define what an emergency is.
Can't define an emergency. You gotta, you'll be spelling out everything in this book. If you say what an emergency, we don't know what constitutes an emergency.
Well, I
Sometimes-
think from what we've seen in the past, or at least the guidance that we received from our city attorney, was that emergencies were things that were like, I guess what you would typically think is an emergency, like it is for the need of the city. But I feel like I feel like we should define that a little bit more, because if the council can just say really anything is an emergency, if we don't have some sort of criteria for what constitutes an emergency.
Okay,
I think that's gonna be hard to do, because what you may deem as an emergency, somebody else may not, and what somebody else
Yeah,
deems as an emergency.
that's exactly what I'm saying. That's
But I mean, but the council got it as a whole needs to decide what the emergency is, even if you spell it out, it could come, because I think you're gonna put yourself in a box,
Mhm.
because you're not gonna be able to cover every occasion. I mean, like one year we had a snow emergency, and we didn't vote on anything, but in the cost of the plowing was way over what the city manager could do without council approval. But the chart also said she could also act in emergency situations if it came down to the well-being of the citizens. So if she does that, and then we say, well, we don't constitute it as an emergency, so we're gonna, I just think it's just a lot of things that you could say as an emergency, you can't say as an emergency, that's a sticky, what you call it?
wicked.
Sticky wicket. So Ms. Ruff, do they do that in other municipalities, spell out what emergencies are?
Most of the jurisdictions I have, I don't see it identified as to what an emergency is for that purpose. More so they define it with respect to like an emergency purchase. I can do a little bit of research. I was kind of looking up something right now to see if I could find something, and all I'm coming up with is what you would think of as an emergency when they talk about it's a threat to the public health,
Right.
safety, or welfare.
Right.
So what if, and I think that this is supposed to, maybe this is that intention, but that the council has to agree that it's an emergency first.
And that's what they do by the 5. That's why you gotta have a supermajority vote,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
you know, because you know, sometimes it's kind of hard to get those 5 votes, but that's why it's a supermajority.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody can look at the facts and decide if it is. If somebody feel that it isn't, then, you know, everybody has said their piece.
Right, because I think the way this reads, it says in cases of emergency, it reads as if it's already defined as an emergency. And what they're voting on is not whether it's an emergency or not, but whether to suspend the rule of, you know, the ordinance can't be introduced and passed at the same time.
Mhm.
But it's a 2-step process. So first you got to vote to deem it an emergency, then you got to vote on the legislation. So
Well,
you
I don't
get
think we've done that. We've had a couple of pieces of ordinance. We have had, I think, at least 2 ordinances that were brought forth as emergencies. And I don't believe we voted, 1, is it an emergency? 2,
yeah, I
you
think
know,
we did.
okay.
We have to look and see. I'm almost sure we did. To bring it to the floor, you have to get the 5 votes to bring it to the floor as an emergency. And then you have to have the votes to pass it.
Mhm.
And if we didn't do it, then we violated our charter.
Well, if I may interrupt, not having seen the document, it's hard to address it, but I will say that a lot of times when we draft those emergency ordinances, one of the items in the whereas clauses or the recitals gives the reasoning why it's an emergency ordinance, and then part of what the one of the sections of the ordinance will do is declare it an emergency. So I don't know if your ordinance may have been drafted like that.
It all depends on who did it. Usually the attorney, when they do it, they usually draft it as like that. Usually if the council member do it, they'll draft it as, they'll just say in a title, this is an emergency ordinance.
Okay.
And they'll label it as an emergency ordinance. I mean, the ordinances should be going before the attorney anyway, before we even bring them to the floor.
Mhm. Okay. I mean, so for now, I think what we have is fine. We can look into this a little bit more to see what other municipalities have, or at the very least, just make sure that like our ordinance template, that we have an emergency ordinance template that includes that language that declares it an emergency and the reason why it's an emergency.
Okay.
Well, I think if we do an emergency ordinance and you run it through the attorney for legal sufficiency, they would let you know.
Mm-hmm. So are we saying it's a requirement to do an emergency or like have the attorney review the emergency ordinance?
We used to have the attorney draft and review all ordinances because they're laws, and we got to make sure they don't conflict with something else.
Mm-hmm.
We should always send those through to the attorney.
Right.
We used to always do it.
But it's not, is it a requirement anywhere? Because it sounds like a good thing to do.
When we were on all accounts I own, we required that all ordinances go through the attorney for legal sufficiency.
Mm-hmm. Do you
Because
think it would
again,
hurt to just put that in here?
Yeah, I mean, you can, but I just think that people should know.
Everybody don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, to be safe, you would think that they want to do that.
Mhm. And
So if
also
I
put a
might
note.
interject, while you were talking, I looked at a couple of jurisdictions and I found that Mount Rainier is the only one that I can locate so quickly that talks about the emergency. And it says in cases of emergency affecting the city's financial health or the immediate preservation of life, health, property, or the public peace, the provision that an ordinance or substantive resolution shall not be acted on at the meeting at which it is introduced may be suspended by the affirmative votes of 4 members of the mayor and council. And then it goes on to talk a little bit more about the process. But that's the only one that I've been able to find as we've been talking about this that really has a definition, if you will, or an indication as to what they consider to be an emergency.
Okay.
And even and if you ask me, even that's very vague, because you can say anything is a financial emergency in your eye, you know.
Mhm.
Anybody can say, okay, I feel this is a financial emergency, let's vote. And then it only requires 4 votes, which I don't agree with. I think an emergency should be a true emergency, and it should be a super majority that makes the decision.
I cannot type tonight. I need to cut my nails. Ordinance. I have a clue. Rational. Emergency. Okay. 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 All right. And the next one is 307, right? Or is there more? Okay. All right. Yeah. Oh, 307. Well, where's 307? What happened to
307.
Can we skip them?
Yeah, page missing.
307, rules and order of business. 307 is right there.
We just went through this, didn't we?
What did we just go through? 306?
You went down to 308, wasn't it?
Yeah, I guess we skipped 307.
So we were up at 305 and then we got to 306 and I think we skipped 307, yes.
Okay. Okay, so going back to 307.
And you had asked some questions and I tried to answer those questions.
Okay.
We answered what the journal was and the meeting minutes, I believe, were addressed as well. And so, you know, absent any kind of rule in your own rules of procedure, then you could look to Robert's rules if you wanted to make that the way that you handled things, right?
Yeah, because so this was really my question, well, around the 4 favorable votes. So section 306 requires 4 favorable votes, but then here it's saying that a council member can make a request for a roll call. And I understood that to be that the council member can make the request, but the rest of the council would need to approve it before that could happen. So I say I want to do a roll call, and then 4 members would have to say, I agree with doing a roll call before we do the roll call.
Well, under Robert's Rules of Order, that's the way it is handled, right? One person makes the motion, you have to have it seconded, and it has to be passed by a majority vote. There's a thing called that Robert's Rules talks about that's called a division. And that would be when like a vote was taken and somebody calls for division because they doubt the vote. When that occurs, that's usually done by one member. And
Okay.
if that one member doubts the vote, then they do a roll call. That doesn't require a second and a vote.
Okay, so what does it mean to say like, I doubt the vote?
So to me, when you look at the Robert's Rules of Order, it's when a vote has been taken.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you do a regular vote and somebody says, you know, look, I couldn't tell how many people voted for and against. I call for division, which means that they will, I doubt the vote. I doubt what you said is true, was the final count. So I'd like you to do a roll call just to make sure.
Okay, so in the case where we're accepting by, what is it called? Acceptance by dissent? Like, so where you say, does anybody disagree with this and nobody says anything, then the person would say, I call for division because they doubt that someone maybe did disagree, but they're not saying it, or?
No,
Okay, I think because basically what they're doing now on the council is they're actually doing the, what it say, a vote by dissent or whatever.
Yeah.
And the president will say, you know, does anybody disagree with this piece of legislation? Hearing none, the motion is passed, you know, and, you know, a council member may not want to, you know, may want a voice vote because they don't want to vote, but yes or no, only yes on it. So I think with this section, it allows the individual to be able to vote and have their vote heard versus, you know, being a group vote, which is basically what they're doing now, you know.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, that this section, if you look at it in isolation, then
Mhm.
yes, it would suggest that. But then in another section, it talks about 4 favorable votes are required. So I thought, and Ms. Ruff is saying that that's what Robert Rules does, is that in that case, the one member who says, I want to hear a roll call, they would say, I would like to make a motion that we do this by roll call. Somebody else would need to second that, and then it would be a vote to go ahead and do the roll call. And if it passes, if, you know, 4 council members say yes, then we would do the roll call. But if 4 council members say no, then we wouldn't do the roll call.
But see, then you run into the problem where you're going to deny a council member their right to vote. Because if they don't agree with it, you're going to move forward anyway. You can't do that. You can't deny any council member their right to vote. If I want to vote no, but y'all vote no, that he didn't hear anything, and he says he says right quick, well, okay, hearing nothing, the motion passed, and you know, a council member is like, no, I want a voice vote. You're basically taking away that council member's right to vote the way he wants to vote because y'all have already moved forward with it. And if the council don't agree with having a voice vote, then that person is stuck with having it in a record that he or she voted yes on something that they don't agree with.
Well, I
That's
think that
why
would be a point of order. Wouldn't that be a point of
That's-
order, not like a voice vote? Like if you're,
No.
what you just described was the president moved on too quickly, like saying, is there any dissent? And the council member wanted to say, I dissent, but they didn't get a chance to. And the council member said, and the council president said, okay, hearing none, this passes. But wouldn't that like be a point of order to say, point of order, council president or mayor, I plan to dissent?
No, because once again, you give the power to the council president to say, I don't have to agree to that point of order. The council president does not have to agree to a point of order. He can say, I don't recognize your point of order. Let's move on. So you're again, you're not giving that person the right to vote because you don't want them to vote. You can't take away a person's right to vote. And that's why I think that's why this section gives you the right to have a voice vote. And if a council member wants to have a voice vote, then I think they should be entitled to have a voice vote, because if I don't agree with something, I don't want it in the record that I did, you know, so.
But
I don't see.
couldn't the council make that just their, the rule is that every vote would require a yay or nay vote?
We do now. That's what we were doing before. That's what we did for the last 80 years. they changed it up this year. So
Oh, okay.
what was a voice vote?
Okay.
They changed it. Yeah, I mean, I feel that it should be a voice vote because everybody needs to know who's voting and how a person is voting.
Mhm.
Because if a person steps away, you know, it isn't right. And I don't think nobody's got to go through all of this back and forth, point of order, motions, and all this other stuff to be able to vote no on something, or maybe vote yes on something. You know,
Mhm.
however you want to vote. You know, we always had voice votes, and I'm not sure why the need to change it was done, but you know,
Well, I
feel
think the
that
parliamentarian was suggesting it as a way to expedite our meetings, to not have
that's
to.
not.
Mhm.
Because my thing is like last time I asked for a voice vote on everything, so it just dragged the meeting out. Whereas if we just would have went for a voice vote, we could have just went ahead and did the voice vote. It takes maybe 10 seconds and be done, you
Mhm.
know. But I just think, and we're not going to get into the parliamentarian, but that's another whole thing because if somebody don't wake her up at these meetings, we're gonna have problems,
Mhm.
you know. So, yep, but that's my feeling. Maybe a lot too heavy on the parliamentarian, and she's not doing anything, if you ask me.
Mhm. Okay, so the question, what action requires a vote? And what's the difference between a consensus and a vote?
Are you asking me, or are you asking what your process is?
Well, I'm asking you, we don't have a process.
So generally speaking, whenever the council is going to take a position, it requires a vote. Right? When you adopt an ordinance, when you adopt a resolution, when you adopt a motion, when you approve a proclamation, consensus, I don't see used very often, but it is sometimes used to say, is there a consensus of council, you know, maybe with respect to an issue. I can't even think of one off the top of my head. An issue comes before you. Is there a consensus of council that we send a letter? You know, sometimes you'll hear something like that. But
Mhm.
generally speaking, you know, when you're going to take an official action, there's usually a motion associated with it for which there would be a vote, yay and nay.
So what things then would require that? Like, because sometimes like we'll get a request on email about something and it's not at like a public meeting. Is that something like when should it be that we say we can handle it on email, like we can agree on email versus we need to bring this forward in the public and say this is what we're doing and we agree on it? That's it just feels gray to me. It's not clearly defined in what cases we do what, because a resolution, right, doesn't have the strength of an ordinance, right? It's not a
Right.
law. A resolution is really just an expression of our opinion, our stance on something.
You might use resolutions to adopt a fee schedule or a fines and penalties schedule, something like that. Jurisdictions will do that with their resolutions sometimes.
Mhm.
To adopt rules of procedure for the council, or to you know, take a position on a particular issue, maybe that's going on in the county or the state, and you want to make it an official position of the city.
Mhm.
You do it by resolution. Ordinances or your laws, charter, as you know,
Mhm.
would require vote. Your annexation resolutions are going to require votes.
Mhm.
You know, I'm trying to think of something you would respond to by email, and not being an elected official myself, I don't know what kinds of questions you may get by email.
Yeah, so as an example, we might get a request to have the gold room, which is one of our which is our enterprise operation, be used for gratis. So
That
let
might
me-
be a motion.
So let me be clear on what my stance is. I think we should be where are actions that can be simplified. I'm in favor of that. So I'm not suggesting that we should bring gold room requests to,
Right.
a resolution. I'm just trying to figure out, because we have nothing that clearly states in what cases it requires us to produce a resolution and bring it through the actions of working it through a work session and getting public comment on it and voting on it, versus just being able to say, yes, I agree with this and we're going to do that. We don't have anything that defines that, but in practice, we're doing both.
So let's say that council decided that they wanted to adopt a policy that said when you would allow that room to be used for free for nonprofit organizations, for this or for that. And maybe the policy goes on to state how much you charge for people to use it, and how many hours one can use it, and what the cost is, and what the cleanup requirements are. That type of a policy you would adopt by resolution. Okay. If you have no policy regarding the use of the room, and so somebody says, can I use it for free? And the administrative person who usually handles it doesn't have any rules by which to judge that response, that's an issue that may come before council to say, what do you think we should do here? And you wouldn't necessarily adopt a resolution for a one-time use, right? So you would generally approve something like that by a motion. Somebody would make a motion that you allow this organization to use the room on this date for this many hours without charge.
Okay, and you're suggesting, when you say make a motion, like that would be in a meeting where someone would make a motion and second the motion, and then.
Correct.
Okay. So it sounds like what you're suggesting is that there could be resolutions, which is like the policy adoption, and then for the actual usage or the request that has come in, that would be a motion and not necessarily a resolution.
Yeah, if it's a one-time thing. So one of the jurisdictions that I had represented, they had a policy on use, right? So it went through who could use it, when they could use it, how many hours they could use it, what their cleanup obligations were, what their setup obligations were, what they could and could not do when they use the property, right? But it didn't allow for them to give it to anybody for free. So when somebody made that request, it came to the council as kind of a exception, if you will, to the policy, because they're not going to charge them. So it came to council as an exception to that policy. And then the council said, yes, yes, they can use it, but they're subject to all the other requirements, the cleanup, the setup, the, acceptable uses, things like that. So that was just a motion that allowed them to do it.
Okay. I don't know, Councilwoman Ferguson, Councilman Herring.
I mean, like I said, this council hasn't done too many consensuses. I mean, a lot of times the consensus were on like basic things. Like Ms. Ruff said, when we were dealing with the developers, hey, we had consensus that we're going to send a letter down to a parking plan to voice a disagreement with it, something like that, or a council in agreement, so we can sign off on it as the council, I mean, most of the resolutions and stuff that we pass are usually dealing with spending. A lot of them are dealing with the spending money in the budget, anything over $6,000, or accepting a contract. Yeah, I mean, our consensus. I mean, like I said, we don't do, this council hasn't done many at all, really. And like I say, with the gold room does say that the council can waive the policies at any time. We do have a policies for the gold room, and it is a line in there that says the council can waive those policies at any time.
Right, so
So
I guess my question is not so much if we can, but how we can, right? Like, if we can waive them, do we need to wait? Is it okay for us to waive them over email? Or do we need to have that in a meeting and bring it forward? And, like speaking about the property managers, when they had asked us to waive the fee, I don't believe we discussed that.
we email went out and nobody wanted to. Yeah, I mean,
I know, but that's what I mean. It was an
Yeah.
email, like it wasn't
I
a
wouldn't discuss
motion
it over
made.
email. Yeah.
It wasn't a
Yes.
motion made at a meeting. There was no resolution. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like,
And
when is it okay?
that should have been a resolution.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, I feel like we need to define that, because some things that I thought should have been resolutions based upon what we make resolutions weren't. And then, so it's not clear.
I think especially like with something like the permit, the $245,000 that they wanted us to waive, that is required that we do, we pass those, that we charge them those permit fees. So we're going to waive that, and we need to publicly vote on that,
Right.
because that one is tax dollars. We're giving away tax dollars, so I mean, things like that. Whenever it involves tax dollars, I think that's when I look at it as being something that needs to be voted on publicly by the council, so they're transparent with everything. Some things are just, just like an email, hey, like I said, can somebody use a nutrition center? Okay, it's down there. Okay, fine. It's not like we charge anything for it. Basic things.
But
So
the
if
gold
I'm-
room being gratis, right? Like, if it's not one of the things that falls under what's already in the policy, like, should that be, done in a public meeting?
Well, I think it all depends. I think it depends on, because again, like I say, now let's say like when you use it or I use it or for a city event, okay, we don't go through all that. We have to do all the votes and all that other stuff because we technically own it and we actually run it. It's run by the council. And then I think it has some people who can get gratis and then some who can't, so I mean, that's where it can get a little tricky.
Ms. Ruff, are you trying to say something?
I didn't want to interrupt. But I would suggest to you that perhaps some of this discussion is really more appropriate for what you might put in your rules that you would adopt, because it says the council shall determine its own rules and order of business, right? So if you have separate rules that govern your procedures, that might be a better place than to bog down your charter
That's fair.
with that kind of information. At least
think
that
that's
would be
fair.
my recommendation.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. So is that a nice way to say, let's move on?
Yeah.
No. I'm just saying that there's a level that you don't want to include in your charter because it's too, you think of your charter as kind of your overarching document, right? And so the types of things about, will this require a motion, or will this require a resolution, or will it require an ordinance? That kind of thing might be more appropriate in your rules of procedure that tells you how you're going to operate, rather than the fact that you adopt resolutions and you adopt ordinances. Do you see what I'm saying?
Got it.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, I wasn't trying to rush you.
No, but thank you for keeping us on track, because we only got 30 minutes left. We're going to finish at 8:30 or before that. Okay, so your next was on Article 4, the mayor, and we said that we're keeping this in so that we can be clear about what the mayor's responsibilities are.
Right, I would.
Okay. All right, so 4 years, okay, we got that. So I'm trying to see what change you made. I've already
And you want to put back in the 1 hour thing?
deleted. Oh, where is it? 1 hour. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so section 402.
Right, that was qualifications. And so what I was saying there is whatever language we agreed on with the section for qualifications for the council member, I would use that here with the mayor as well.
Okay. Okay.
Same with the salary.
Yeah. Wait, what about
Correct.
some? Yeah, okay, let me just add this part about the code, checking the code for. Okay. And
And then the
then
same with salary, yes.
just use the
As
same
Mr.
language for
Herring said,
salary.
yes.
Okay,
So then we
then-
got down to the mayors, and that's where I said we should keep the mayor's powers, right? So we want to restate that the mayor shall be a member of council.
mhm,
We've already said before that they're going to preside over the council meetings when we talked about the chair of the council, right? So
Mhm.
here we go directly to the mayor having all the rights and duties and obligations of a council member, because that means they're allowed to make a motion, they're allowed to vote.
mhm,
And so then I added that the mayor shall serve as the council's presiding officer and participate in all discussions. And that might be a little repetitive, and if you want to take some of that out, we can.
mhm,
But clarified that the mayor does not have the power of veto.
mhm.
Then, oh, I keep trying to go down and I can't move it. So the mayor shall be recognized as the head of the city government for all ceremonial purposes by the court for serving civil process and by the governor for purposes of emergency law. That
Mhm.
was taken just from other samples of charters that I found. If you don't like any of that, we can certainly take it out.
Mhm.
And then the mayor shall report. I didn't change that section at all.
Mhm.
And then E, I didn't change, left that the way it was.
Mhm.
And then you all had already suggested the last time that E and F be deleted,
Well,
so.
yeah, because right now, and just for purposes of this recording as well, because I think it's important every time we talk about the mayor's responsibilities to be very clear
Mhm.
that we're actually not taking away any powers of the mayor. We're not taking away existing powers with the exception of the veto. But what we are giving the mayor instead of the ability to veto is the ability to vote, which is more impactful than a veto, particularly if with a veto, it's basically null and void if you have the majority of the council members approving it to begin with. Then with a veto, they're just going to override that. So now with what this new form of government is, the mayor will be able to vote. The mayor will be able to speak at meetings. In fact, the mayor will be the presiding officer, which is very different than we have it right now. Right now at our meetings, the mayor sits off to the side and cannot speak unless she's been recognized by, or he has been recognized by the president. They don't have the right to have discussion. They don't have the right to vote. And so this will be changing with that. The mayor will still be what you would think a typical mayor is, the ceremonial head of the city, which is the case today. They will still retain the title of mayor. The difference, and it's not a difference that's a result of this charter resolution committee. This was a difference that was already addressed, was the overlap, right? There were conflicts between what the city administrators, the chief administrator's role was and what the chief executive's role were. They had the same duties, which created a lot of conflict because if you have a city manager who's responsible for doing stuff and you have a mayor who's responsible for doing the same things, obviously there's going to be a conflict if they're not lockstep in agreement for everything. So this even, just removes that and allows the city administrator, who is the person who works full time and is administrating the city, to administer the affairs of the city. And again, the mayor now has a voice in the council. They're able to bring forward resolutions without sponsorship. Right now, the mayor can't bring forward a resolution unless it's sponsored by someone on the council. So that will be a difference as well. Any other differences you all can think of? All right, hearing none, we'll go on to we'll go on to the next thing.
I just want to reiterate that should this form of government be voted in, again, this will not take place until the next administration in 2025.
The mayor will still do the report, but instead the report will be to the citizens, not to the council as it is now. And the mayor is not going to be required to make monthly reports to the council as the mayor is currently required to do. And so that takes care of the role of the mayor. And then the mayor pro tem. Okay. It's basically what the mayor pro tem fills in for the mayor when the mayor is absent.
Right.
Okay. Or in those instances where the mayor expires, the mayor pro tem. Or, oh, I put other because that's not what the term is. I was supposed to look it up. What it says about when the, I'm trying to think, get my thought together. It says somewhere in here about like what happens, like what if the mayor and right now, what if the mayor and the president are not available, right? Then it's the vice president who becomes the mayor, right? And then someone will need to be selected from amongst the remaining council members to be the president.
Well, right now in our rules, it says if the mayor, if the president and the vice president are not available, then the council will pick from amongst themselves for somebody to lead the meetings.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about when I said other, like that language around picking.
But it's in our rules.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you really need it.
Well, so what should we say? Because it says in those instances where the duties of mayor are exercised by either the mayor pro tem or whoever else is selected by the council. That's what I.
Okay.
The other, like, I don't know what that term is. I don't think there is a term.
If it's addressed in your rules of procedure, then maybe we should look at those to see how it's termed there and move that language in.
Yeah, that's what I was saying here. So that's the language that needs to be moved here. Let me just put use language from rules. But it's basically what Councilman Herring says, like who the council person is selected.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be or other, it'd just be in those instances where the duties of the mayor are exercised by either the mayor by the mayor pro tem, then whatever it says in our rules would apply. And I can't remember the wording, but I do know it says we'll pick from amongst ourselves.
Okay.
Because really, I guess you really wouldn't, because again, we're now if you're saying if neither one of them are there.
Yeah, so if the mayor pro tem is not there, right? Because now that's the next person. So if the mayor pro tem and the mayor are not there, someone from amongst the council will need to act as mayor.
Yeah, then that'd be from a decision amongst the remaining 5.
So we'll just use the languages in the council rules because it's what you said. And then this is not applicable because there's no mayor and council president anymore. Okay, the appointment, the removal. Was this out? No, the purple is yours. Do you want to talk about it? The changes that you made, Ms. Ruff? You're on mute.
You-
There it goes. I pressed it 6 times before it came off. I apologize. I started to look at the city manager and how you would want to phrase the city manager's authority and appointment, etc. And I kind of got hung up on the fact that it really depended on how we resolve the issues that we just went through as to how you might want to structure this. So you'll see that I had suggested, based on some other samples, that we say there shall be a city manager appointed by the council. The city manager shall serve at the pleasure of the council, and the city manager's compensation shall be determined by the council. The city manager shall be appointed. I don't know that you want to say solely on the basis of executive and administrative qualifications, because I think those might be heavily weighted, but there may be other considerations that you may want to take into account. And then the rest of it, I left pretty much the way it was.
It looks good to me.
Yeah, I'm fine with it also.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't make any changes to authority. And then the powers and duties, I could give you example after example after example of how other jurisdictions do their powers and duties of their city managers. And if you would like a couple, we can do that. But yours is fairly consistent with what others do. But if you would like me to provide you with some samples, like I said, I certainly can do that.
I mean,
Same
I
that-
personally think the powers and duties of the city manager are clear. I think the only issue we've had is, again, there was a conflict between the powers and duties for the city manager and the ones that were for the mayor.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, so the mayor will still do the annual budget message. Yeah.
So, I mean, I pulled up Mount Rainier, since you all seem to tend towards their samples. The city manager is the chief administrative officer responsible to the mayor and council for the administration of all city affairs placed in the city manager's charge or under the city charter and code of ordinances. And then it talks about the city manager appointing city employees and appointed administrative officers, directing and supervising the administration of all departments, offices and agencies of the city, attending council meetings, seeing that the laws and provisions of the charter are enforced, prepare and submit an annual budget, submit to the mayor and council, and make available to the public a report on the finances and administrative activities of the city each year, make reports requested by the mayor and council, keep the mayor and council advised of the financial condition, make recommendations to the mayor and council concerning the affairs of the city, provide staff support to the mayor and council, perform any other duties specified in the charter, city ordinances, or required by the mayor and council, and then designate by letter from time to time somebody who will act in his or her absence. So that will give you just a kind of a quick idea of what theirs says.
Okay, that sounds pretty consistent with ours.
Mm-hmm.
I think
That's
one
what
of
I'm
the
saying.
I think one of the ones though that we need to look at, because it might be a conflict with the code. I think it makes sense, but I'll just bring up the point. As H, it says the city manager can authorize all purchases of supplies and equipment in line with the established budget and the availability of specifically allotted funds as authorized by the council. I think this makes perfect sense. which is why I don't know why we bring resolutions forward for items that have already been budgeted and approved. Because this says that the city manager has the authorization to go ahead and purchase those things as long as it's within the budget. But then we're also saying that they can't purchase these things if they're over a certain amount.
Well,
But isn't that what section 818 said? Nothing can be purchased over $6,000 without council approval. And a lot of municipalities have that. I mean, we just raised the limit up, but again, I think that keeps us it keeps us knowing what's actually being done in the city of Glenarden. I wouldn't want any city manager to go out here and sign a contract for trash for $700,000. I don't care if it was approved in the budget or not. It might not be the best contract. You know, the council needs to see things like that. And anything over $6,000 requires a contract. So giving that type of latitude to anybody without any oversight could be a dangerous game. I've seen money walk out of the city before.
No, and I definitely, $700,000 is a lot of money. I guess I think the $6,000 is low.
You may want to look at increasing that. I probably wouldn't, but you know, we can put it out there.
I guess I just would think that it would be stuff that's like in the ordinary course of business, whatever that might mean.
I think that's why we took it up to $6,000 so that they can get stuff in the ordinary course of business. I mean, it used to be $2,000. You know, you couldn't even buy a copier. You know, probably having to come before the council. You know, and even at $6,000, you got to look out because you know, that can be abused. So, I mean, I know we can't micromanage everything, but we do have a fiduciary responsibility to the citizens to make sure that tax dollars are being spent wisely and correctly.
No, I agree. And certainly something over $100,000, in my opinion, would be something that needs to be brought forward, but I don't know. Yeah, we can talk about that separately.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that section too, so.
Okay. Okay. Ms. Ferguson, were you gonna say something? It looked like you were.
No,
Okay. So you haven't made any changes here. This is consistent
No.
with what we discussed last time. Okay, so then I think, oh, yeah, okay, this is all stuff we took out. So what we needed to do, because we're still ending at the same place where we ended last time, but it was good to kind of go through and at least get our answers. We need to discuss for the charter purposes how the mayor will be elected, if the mayor will be elected at large apart from the 6 council members, or if there will be an election and 7 people will run for council, and then the council will choose the mayor from amongst them. So that's what we need to resolve with the council, or not resolve, but discuss with the council so we can decide what to put here in the charter. The other thing that we were going to discuss is what we said we would discuss as like part of our rules. It's not part of the charter changes necessarily, but the procedures that we will follow for our resolutions and our ordinances. Right, like when we can do something as a motion, when it needs to be a documented resolution, like the formality or the process around how to get that done. We can handle that separately. It won't be part of the charter. So with that, does anyone else have anything they want to address?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, then I think we're good. Thank you, citizens. Ms. Crutchfield, thank you for joining. This session has been recorded. This mocked up version of the charter will be posted on our space and the website, as well as the recording. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.
okay.
Oh,
You
this is in
too.
the chat. Okay. All right. Okay.
Good
Bye.
night.
Okay, bye-bye.